Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am finally married after 3 postponements and 2 years of waiting due to COVID. Tommy and I finally tied the knot. Yay! If you follow me over on Instagram, you'll have already seen a ton of photos. I have spammed my feed with wedding content. I did film our wedding vacation and I also filmed kind of like some material on the run up to the wedding. I may do like a wedding vlog and a wedding vacation vlog, and then I'll also have the wedding video. So those will go up as and when I've got time to edit them. But tons of you did request a tutorial on my wedding makeup. So I am going to film my wedding makeup today. I'm also going to do my hair. My twin sister actually did my hair for my wedding and for my home UK reception. So let's get on with today's makeup tutorial. So for my wedding makeup, I actually did 2 versions of the same makeup. When I was away, the photographer that I specifically picked specialised in really nice bright daylight photos. So I knew that the makeup would need to be a little bit heavier on the eyes in order for it to still show. Whereas my makeup for the home wedding reception was just not quite as dark through the socket, which is the makeup that I prefer. So that's the makeup I'm going to do today because that's how it looked in the photos that you've seen. But obviously I'll explain that you can go darker through the socket if, like me, you were getting married somewhere really bright and your photographer specialises in really nice bright photos where it's going to kind of like take down your makeup. So I'll explain those bits as we get to them. When we do the eye makeup, I will switch to a voiceover, but for the rest of it, I will talk to you guys as I do it. So I'm going to start with the Bobbi Brown Vitamin Enriched face base. I only took a very small amount of that because my skin is quite oily and this is geared towards oily skin, but I'd already done my skincare in the day. The only thing that I hadn't done was I decided to forego, which I've always said and recommend to all my brides, is to forego your sunscreen. I'm all for sunscreen on a regular basis, but just for your wedding day, because you don't want any flashback and you just don't want it to kind of affect the way the makeup sits on the skin, I would just recommend not putting any sunscreen on. So in the day I had done my Zoe skincare, which I haven't actually filmed a tutorial on, but I've been doing it since December. You'll know that I went through lots of peely stages where I was on kind of like intense retinols, but my skin was incredible for my wedding day, so I'm so grateful that I pursued doing that. It's quite a costly thing to do. I don't get any of that for free. I pay for everything and it really is expensive, but it made such a difference to my skin. The difference between that and say like the Dr. Sam's, which you know I absolutely love, is you need a prescription strength for some of the products that I was using. So I had to go and see a kind of like a skin specialist for that. Next I'm going in with the Bobbi Brown Vitamin Enriched Eye Base. Now with the face base, I didn't take it up underneath the eyes. I always just leave that free of that kind of moisturiser and instead go in with the eye base. I love the smell of these. They've got like a grapefruit scent. When we got back off holiday, both Tommy and I were quite under the weather. I think it's kind of like the stress of planning everything. So it's like such a huge event to do. A wedding in itself is big, but taking it abroad, it's a big task. And Tommy come back with chest infection and now I'm starting to get a kind of like a raspy voice. I'm hoping I'm not going to come down with it too. Right, so I'm going to allow that to soak in. A great product to put into your kit if you're doing your own makeup or ahead of a makeup artist turning up is to get the Charlotte Tilbury Instant Magic Facial Dry Sheet Masks. Each one of these masks can be used 3 times. I really hate those really drippy wet face masks that you put on. It makes my skin itch, it drips down your face, it's just uncomfortable, it constantly slides and it just becomes a bit irritating. So these ones are dry, but what happens is your skin tends to kind of like warms it up and it almost goes like a balm on your skin, and you'd leave it on for around 15 minutes and your skin is beautifully prepped, ready for makeup. I had every intention of using these on the morning, but like every wedding morning and you're the bride and you're doing it all by yourself, it tends to just go so quickly. So I just didn't get around to using it, but it was perfectly fine with the Vitamin Enriched face base and the eye cream. Now when it comes to primer, this was my preference. I love this one specifically with the foundation that I've chosen. This is the Make Up Forever Smooth In Base, And you can also get this with the shine control. So if you specifically just want to target oil over skin texture, for instance, you can put the shine control just through the T-zone. This one is the smoothing base, which is my preference because it almost is like a mattifying base at the same time as smoothing out skin texture. So I like this for around the areas that you have visible pores. So that was my preference. But if you are somebody that is of the drier skin type, you might want to try their hydrating base. This one you would put all over the face and only use thin layers of these. The idea is that the primer works for you and not against you. And in order to know that you're using the right primer with the right foundation, it would be a good idea if you can get a little bit familiar with the ingredients. You can then tell if you're using a silicone or water-based primer. So if you're using a silicone-based foundation, you need to really use a silicone-based primer. And if you're using a water-based foundation, you need a water-based primer. You can use a water-based primer with a silicone-based foundation, but you can't use a silicone-based primer with a water-based foundation. If you've not seen my tutorial, I will link it on screen for you now. It will help if you are somebody that maybe finds that your foundation separates, they're not quite gelling and it's not lasting all day. That could solve your problems. So go check that out. Next I went in with the Lisa Eldridge Seamless Skin Elevated Glow. This is her beautiful highlighter in Crystal Nebula. It comes in a variety of different shades. She's also just added a new one to the collection. This is going on underneath my foundation. Now the reason I chose to put this on underneath is I really like that glow from within look that you can do with bridal makeup, with any makeup really, but I just really like the glow from within look. Also, this has a product in it or an ingredient in it that works like a mesh on the skin, so it tightens the skin underneath your foundation. So I like to apply this just on the cheekbones and the brow bone. So not only will it glow from underneath your foundation, it will tighten your skin. So again, a nice thin layer of that. Press that in with your fingers. Again, you can use a brush, but I just like the ease of my fingers. So I didn't start my makeup until my sister had done my hair. I probably should have started my makeup a little bit earlier because we got to the point where I just finished my makeup and they were like, we need to get you in your dress, but I hadn't finished the girl's hair. On the morning, it just goes so quickly. So that gives a really beautiful glow to the skin. You can apply this over your makeup as well as underneath, but for me, I just wanted it to tighten the face as much as possible. Now I didn't apply any other products to the skin. I decided I would go straight in with my foundation. You can do your eye makeup first, but bear in mind if you're doing a lot of work with darker shadows and stuff, you may get some fall down. 2 weeks ago, I uploaded a review of this foundation, which was a bit of a fail. However, I'd been playing around with it. I'd filmed it a couple of months before it went up and I had a chance to play around with it, and combining it with this particular primer, I found it to last so much better than my first impressions of it. And I did explain that in the review. So for my wedding makeup, I decided to go with the Makeup Forever HD Skin. Now the reason I chose this one in particular is because it is very long wearing, it's sweat resistant, humidity proof, and it really did last all day. I actually have a couple of shades because I've got a little bit of colour. I'm actually going to go in with 3N42 around the circumference of my face, and then I'm going to use the 2N22 on the centre. I will link the review to this foundation up on the top screen for you now, but bear in mind that was a first impressions and I've since loved this foundation. It's brilliant. It is quite glowy, probably more than you would opt for as an oily skin, but being a makeup artist, I'm quite happy to carry around a powder and just continue to kind of set my face throughout the day because I just feel like this gives the most beautiful skin-like finish. It's one of those ones that you don't look like you're wearing makeup, but you look completely and utterly flawless. It's so beautiful. So I'm going in with the slightly darker shade around the circumference of our face, and I used a beauty blender to work that in. Again, you can use a brush, but my preference is a sponge because you just get a lovely airbrushed finish to the skin. It will look a little bit different to my body to begin with, but it will all come together once we start using some bronzer. I didn't take this all the way over the eyes. I used a little bit off of my sponge on the brow bone, and then I go in with concealer over the eyes. So I always like to work through the centre first if I'm using a different shade, and then go around the circumference of the face, so that the darker shade stays where we want it. Don't forget to take it over the ears. So as you may or know if you follow me on Instagram, I actually got married in Disney in Orlando. It's a very different place to get married. It's completely different to any wedding I've ever been to. And I just loved it. We love Disney. Tommy proposed to me outside Cinderella's castle when we were there in 2019. It's a little special place for us. It's our kind of go-to holiday. We love it. And being slightly older, we weren't fussed about doing it for anybody else other than ourselves. So it was like, where do we want to get married? What kind of wedding do we want? And we only took 10 people with us, our immediate family, because we knew we would have a little home celebration for those that couldn't come with us. We did exactly what we wanted to do. When we first thought about getting married in Disney, we was like, oh my God, that could be really cheesy. I don't want a cheesy wedding. I wanted something really romantic and beautiful. And then I started looking into it, and then I realised they do the most incredible weddings. Some of you will already probably know that they do if you watch Disney fairy tale weddings, which I didn't know existed until I started looking into weddings in Disney. And yeah, so we chose to get married at the Wedding Pavilion near the Grand Floridian on Seven Seas Lagoon, which overlooks Magic Kingdom, so you can see the castle at altar. It's beautiful. It's very small, obviously, but yeah, it overlooks Magic Kingdom, which is divine. You're going to go in with a second layer because we do want longevity, and that first layer is nice and thin because this is really, really lightweight. But I'm just going in with the lighter shade. Where we stayed was at the Grand Floridian. We actually stayed at the villas because I actually prefer where they overlook the lake and where you could see the Wedding Pavilion from the window. And if you're familiar with Dirty Dancing, when you look at the Grand Floridian villas, it's like Kellerman's. It just reminds you of Dirty Dancing. It's so pretty. So it's kind of like every girl's dream. I always like to go in with a small brush and just press that onto the pores over my nose because it just gives a bit more of an airbrushed finish, and it really lasts. It doesn't come away. I love this foundation. I think it's going to be a favourite of mine for maybe forever. So lovely. It just gives you the coverage, but it's so skin-like. Don't forget to take it down your neck, and always make sure you take it over your ears if your ears are going to be exposed. Don't forget to also take it around here. If your hair's up, take it all the way around here and make sure everything that's visible is the same colour. I'm going to take a small amount of bronzer on a big kabuki brush and just buff that down my neck. Your neck always tends to be a bit lighter. Your chin shields it from the sun, so it always ends up a bit lighter. Your foundation will always tend to sort of pull a little bit more yellow if your skin has a natural tan, because there's a lot of redness under here. So sometimes it's good to reach for a bronzer that has a bit more of a reddy undertone to it, and then that will kind of like pull everything nicely together. So the concealer that I opted to use was the same one I used when I was doing my review and how to stop concealer creasing underneath your eyes, which if you've not seen, I will link on screen for you now. I used the Good Apple Concealer by KVD, and I used a couple of shades because I wanted it to kind of be brighter but still natural. I'm really not a fan of super bright under eyes because it just doesn't look realistic, and although in some photos it can look lovely, in the flesh it looks awful. I just wanted to look like just an enhanced version of me rather than something that was just unrealistic. When it comes to wedding makeup, you want to look completely timeless. I have the shades Light 119 and Medium 129. I'm going to go in the Medium 129 first because I can't remember which shade I used. That is going on the inner corner, underneath here, and on this bit here, and then I'm going to use what's left on my sponge to bounce that over the top. Because I got married in Florida and it was like close to 35 degrees on our actual wedding day, it was blooming warm, I wanted to make sure that my eyeshadow didn't move, so I used a little bit of the NARS tinted smudge proof eyeshadow base. I don't know if a lot of places still sell the tinted version. You can get the untinted one, but I have shared this before. The tinted one's really nice. You get it in light, medium and dark, but you can also use it as a concealer because it's got an almost kind of eyeshadow primer vibe to it. The idea is that it doesn't move and it doubles as a really good concealer that doesn't move. But I just took that over the lid space, but I'm not going to do it today because I didn't do it for the home wedding. I'm going to take a little bit of the Light 119 just to brighten this a little bit. So I'm going to press that just on top and here. So taking my sponge, I'm going to bounce that straight on the center, like the inner corner rather, and then look up and bounce it all the way along. I like going up and out because it almost lifts that side of your face, but I wouldn't leave it this stark. So I bounce it on, then I turn my sponge over and then pick up the excess product and keep working that in. I'm going to do this side and then I like to blend it in with my fingers as well. So press it in. Again, you don't want to be too bright, otherwise it won't look natural. So the concealer will also work as a nice base for your eyeshadow. Then I like to go with my ring finger and press, 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 press. And again, this will kind of pick up the excess, which I work into the palms of my hands just to get it off. And that way you're taking off all the excess product, pressing it into the skin with your fingers, and you'll see it starts to look a lot less stark. But obviously it won't look this stark once you finish because all your eyeshadow is going to be on top. Having that thin layer as opposed to just leaving it on there from bouncing over with your sponge means it's going to stay in place because you've picked up all that excess product, so it's less likely to move, it's less likely to crease, but it is full coverage, so you still get everything you need to kind of hide any imperfections. So you can see it's really starting to look much more natural. Just a little bit here on the chin, under here, because this is where I get a little bit of redness. Little bit just there, and this will just brighten the center of the face, and this is the medium 129, so it's still very much like the color of the foundation but maybe like half a shade lighter, so it looks natural. A tiny bit more coverage and a little bit more longevity. Now on the actual wedding day I did my makeup in very natural daylight. I sat by the window but just out of the actual direct light, that way I could see the makeup without it being like blown out by the light, which means I would have put more on than I needed, but not too far away from the light so that I could actually see what was, you know, what I was doing properly. So it's a nice way to do your makeup. For eyebrows, I did the same as I always do, which you know, I absolutely love my Urban Decay brow blade in the shade Cool Cookie. So I use a cotton bud to wipe over my brows to make sure there's no foundation sitting in the hairs. So I took the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Powder, took a little fluffy blending brush, buffed that over to set anything in place. Again, with your cotton bud, just go directly over the hairs to remove any excess powder, and then they're good to fill in. I do have a tutorial on how I fill in my brows. It's exactly the same method. I'm going to link it on screen for you and then I'll be back. So now I've filled in my brows, I'm going in with my iconic London Liquid Brow Silk Max Hold. This works in the same way that the Anastasia Beverly Hills Brow Freeze works, only this is a liquid. It goes out slightly white but it dries clear, and it is the most amazing brow gel. This one's got more power with pushing your brows up and keeping them there. You don't have to flatten them. It's just really good at manipulating those little hairs. If you apply it too thickly, it will go white and you will be able to see it on the brow, so I would recommend taking all the excess product off of the bristles before you start using it. So I use this on my wedding day. I'm taking my Bare Minerals Faux Tan Bronzer on my MAC 286 Duo blending brush, and I'm buffing that through the socket of the eye, and I'm also just pulling it a little bit further out towards the tail of the brow on the outer edge. I always like to use a bronzer. I usually opt for the same one I'm going to use on the face, because if this is the highest colour that we're taking towards that brow bone, it will always tie in your eyes with your face makeup. Next I'm going in with the Refa 27 brush, and I'm going to use this to buff over. It's always good to go in with a clean blending brush to buff over each stage so that you don't have any seams. This is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Primrose palette, and when it first came through a long time ago, I tried this colour called Rose Water and I knew instantly this was going to be a colour that I used on my wedding day. My preference is to apply this to the lid with my finger, but you can use a flat shader brush such as this one, but you can just see the difference. It packs it on, but not quite as well as when you use your finger. The payoff with your finger is much more incredible with this finish of eyeshadow. This is a metallic finish opal with a multi-dimensional reflex to it. Then I went in with the Master Mattes palette by Mario, and this I actually picked up in Sephora while I was in America. For this entire look, I'm just using these three matte brown eyeshadows. I'm going in with the Refa number 26 pointed crease brush, and I'm using this on the outer third of the mobile lid in a bit of a V shape, so quite classic. And at this stage, I'm only using a mix of the two lighter browns. And I'm using a super light hand to buff this on, making sure it's lighter as it meets the actual middle of the mobile lid. And then I'm going back in with my Refa blending brush to work that into the colour, which is the bronzer that we've already got in the socket line. Here I'm using what's left on the bristles and a very light hand to work that colour into the socket, just to deepen it ever so slightly, and again blending that through. You've seen me pull this out many times before. This is the Loose Pigment by Peaches and Cream in the shade Peached, and I always knew I would reach for this on my wedding day. This is going on the very centre of the mobile lid, so I'm not completely covering rose water, but it works in unison with it. It's so pretty. And I'm also popping this on my pencil brush by Refa on the inner corner of the eyes. I did this so that rose water wouldn't pull too pink in photos. My favourite combination for eyeliner is the Bobbi Brown Sepia ink mixed with the Inglot Duraline. Even though the gel eyeliner is a long wear formula, I find that the Inglot Duraline just makes it completely waterproof, which I think is a must on any wedding day in case you have any tears. And the brush I'm using is actually a craft brush because those are my favourite kind of brushes for eyeliner. So I'm creating a wing. I'm keeping it quite wide. I'm not lifting it too high, but I'm also making sure it doesn't droop the eye. I uploaded a tutorial last week on my top 5 types of makeup brushes for the eyes. So go check that out because I actually talk a little bit about the craft brushes in that video. I'm now going to line the top lash line super close to the root of the eyelashes, all the way from the inner corner to meet that wing that we've already created. And remember, this isn't going anywhere because we've applied the waterproofing agent to it. Another recent find for me is this All Smudge No Budge eyeliner by Made by Mitchell in the shade Tiger's Eye, and this is so soft and it doesn't move once it's in place. This was the perfect eyeliner for the waterline. I do usually just go in with the sepia ink, but you can see that this is a little bit darker than the sepia ink, so that's why I chose to go for this along the waterline. However, it's a little bit more classic bridal not to apply a eyeliner along the waterline because it makes your eyes look a little bit bigger if you just use a flesh tone. So that is completely optional for yourself, but this is what I wanted to go for. Taking my Refa pointed crease brush, I'm dipping it into the slightly darker of the 3 brown shades from the Master Mattes palette, and I'm just emphasising that outer socket line coming off of that wing. Then I'm taking my small pencil brush again by Refa, dipping that into the 3 brown shades so that it matches the top lash line, and I'm running that underneath the bottom lashes. I do this so that it frames the eye and then the eyeliner doesn't look stark. I'm then going to give my lashes a curl. These are the Refa eyelash curlers, and look how much it makes my eyelashes stand up. I literally don't use another pair now. As you know, I'm a huge fan of the Lancome L'Oreal mascara, and just before I came away they sent me their waterproof version, so I was most excited because I hadn't decided which waterproof mascara I was going to go for, and I must tell you this is a pig to remove, but you want that assurance on your wedding day. My eyelashes just seem to have grown in the last 2 weeks since we've got home. I was going for a bit of an eyelash shed before we went out there, so I used a mix of different eyelashes. Today I'm only going to use half the amount that I needed because my eyelashes, as you can see, are looking super long again and nice and incredible. They've all grown back through, and as you see, that Refa eyelash colour is great because even though I've applied mascara, they've not come back down, they are standing upright, so this combination is great. So this is how the eye makeup looks with just mascara, no eyelashes. So if you're not somebody who likes eyelashes, then this could be for you. I actually went in with some dovetail lashes from Swede Makeup all the way along, and then I filled in with a couple of these thicker ones. However, today I'm just going in with these because I don't need the addition of the dovetail lashes because my natural lashes are back to being at their full potential again. I'm applying 5 of these on the outer half of the eyelid. And then as we get towards the inner corner, I'm going to swap to a different lash just so it's slightly smaller. Now what I love about these is that they have a bit of a spike in the centre and then they fluff out on either side. So you get a spiky finish, but it's still fluffy. So as we get towards the inner half of the eye, I'm swapping to these ones. These are the same style, so they're still spiky in the centre and fluffy on the outer edges, but they're a lot smaller in size. That gives a bit more of a natural finish to the eye in terms of we follow our natural lash pattern. I also, after this, go in with just some individual spikes, which again I did on the wedding day because I wanted to just add in some dimension to the lashes. I don't want them to be too uniformed. So I took these short Ardell individual lashes and just popped them on in different areas where I felt like I needed a couple of spikes. Of course, you can just add a strip lash. I find that these are a little bit more reliable than a strip lash. They're not going to ping up and they don't fall off. And they just photoed so beautifully. But like all elements of this look, it's completely up to you. You don't have to apply these kind of lashes. You can go with just the dovetail if you want something a lot lighter, or you can just use some individual cluster lashes. Then to finish off the eye makeup, I've applied that same waterproof mascara on my lower eyelashes. So here's what the eye makeup looks like just before I go in and finish the face. I think it's so pretty and it photos beautifully. It obviously photos a lot softer and a lot more natural. And on the actual wedding day, I made the socket a little bit darker just for photographic purposes. Okay, so that's my eye makeup done. I'm going to move back onto the skin. I took the Kevyn Aucoin, the sculpting powder in the shade medium, and I used that just down the sides of my nose. I like this one because it gives a natural shadow, so it just kind of gives a bit of dimension to the skin, or dimension to the nose. And although it goes on quite intense to begin with, you can really blend it down. I've not set the foundation on the nose, so we're going to use that to our advantage. So I'm just going down very softly on a small detailer brush just down the sides of the nose. And don't forget, in flash photography, a lot of colour and dimension kind of drains away from the skin, so we want to put that back in with contour. You don't have to contour your nose, it's not a necessity. It's a nice way to kind of tie everything together. So put it down at the bridge of your nose and start pulling the contour downwards slightly. Don't be afraid at this stage. Again, because we have the foundation on the nose but we've not set it, it's going to work in our favour. As we press it into that foundation, it will kind of melt in and become a shade between the contour colour and the foundation. You can go back in with your sponge and just press over it, bounce it in place, so you're not moving it from where you've placed it, but instead you're pressing it into the skin. And using what's left on the sponge will also help to kind of make sure that that colour's not too intense, but you get a perfect shadow. So just press, 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 press. Don't swipe because you don't want to move the contour from where you've placed it. Instead you want to press it in so it becomes a lot more natural. Use a brush just at this top section. To add a little bit of contour to the rest of the skin, I decided to use a cream. My preference is cream because it blends beautifully and it just looks nicer. So I went in with this shade called Bondi Bay, which is the Nudies Matte by Nude Sticks. And the reason I chose this one is because it's a slightly cooler shade. If you want something warmer, terracotta tan works beautifully. I worked this on the back of my hand and then I used my sponge to bounce that into the hollows of the cheeks and a little bit around the hairline. Again, using thin layers of like a cream and then a powder will work in your favour because it means it will last longer. So this just went in to where the hollows of the cheeks are and a little bit higher. You don't want to bring it down too far, but you do want to make sure the edges are blended, so you can always turn your sponge around to pick up any excess product. And don't go too heavy with it. Flash photography will drain a lot of colour from your face, but you don't want it to be so intense that in any ordinary photography where there's no flash, you don't look like you're wearing too much. It's just about finding that balance. So you can see it's just starting to sculpt the face and just a little bit around your hairline. If you don't have a large forehead or your forehead is particularly small, then you might not want to do this because it will make it look slightly smaller and a little bit more defined. Don't forget to take it into your hairline. Now this blush I actually got while I was out in America before the wedding. It wasn't one that I planned to wear, but I ended up loving it. This is the Natasha Denona Puff Paint. This is the shade Daria. Again, I worked this on the back of my hand, like so. It's such a lovely pinky peach. And then I used my IT Cosmetics Heavenly Luxe Complexion Perfection No. 7 brush. I wish they'd give it a shorter name. I stippled it on to the bristle so there wasn't a lot of colour. And then I put that just past the apples of the cheeks, bouncing the colour backwards. And you're better off doing this in very fine layers because if you apply too much, then you'll have ruined it. But you want enough on there, again, so that if you're under flash photography, it still shows up. So use what's left on the bristles to pull that towards the apples of the cheeks. I love this shade and it lasted all day. It was so pretty. You can also use this one on your lips. Don't forget to press your blush back in with your beauty blender just to take off any excess. The beauty about this foundation is you can just keep going back in with it. It doesn't get cakey and it doesn't look thick. So what I did on the wedding day was I put my blush on, and then I put a little bit of fresh foundation onto the tip of my sponge, and then I worked it in over this portion of my face just to make sure that my blush didn't come too far forward and that everything started to look seamless. It looks a lot pinkier in this light. It's a lot peachier in real life, which you'll see from my mobile shots of my makeup. Then I went in and set my makeup. Now in my video on how to stop concealer creasing, I used the silica powder, which is the hyaluronic powder by Terry, and this one is fantastic at keeping your concealer in place all day long because it's a silicone based powder. It works in a way that it almost becomes kind of like waterproof and it just stops it from creasing. However, the silica does tend to flash back, so I didn't use this on my wedding day. Instead, I went in with the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless powder because this one you can use over and over and it just doesn't get cakey. And the two of these together are a dream. So I used my little LH Cosmetics powder puff, and I use this through the center of the face initially and then use what's left, work that over the other areas of the face. And I actually took a small version of this powder out with me so I could use it in the day. Now you don't have to set everything in place. Like if you're particularly dry, you might not want to use a powder, but I would recommend setting the center of your face at least, because that does tend to be the area that we have like sebaceous glands. Now the powder bronzer that I used on the day was my Endless Summer Bronzer by Bare Minerals. You know, I absolutely love this. It's one I use religiously. I've used it for years. It's my favorite. I'm going to use my Refa brush in number 5 and then just use that really lightly to sweep over the areas that you've bronzed. Again, just don't go crazy, enough that it will pick up on camera, but so you still look natural in photos. A lot of mine you can't even see that I'm wearing makeup on my face. In some of the shots it's really lovely, you know, I've just got enough colour. My sister said to me, oh, I should have put more makeup on. I said, I did tell you. It's one of those things that you don't know how much to put on if you're doing your own makeup, unless, like me, I've done it for years for bridal. You kind of get used to how much makeup you need to put on in order for it to be visible. If you do light layers of it, you can build it up really softly. You can go in with a little bit of your foundation, really work that in, and you go along and just tidy up along the jawline and make it a bit sharper. I then went back in with my powder and my sponge. I used the opposite side, and I used this just to press the powder in place. Again, mostly through the T section so that it doesn't look oily. And I love this foundation. It does get a bit glowy, but I love it. You'll notice that I actually haven't set underneath my eyes. My preference isn't to set the concealer because then I can just kind of look up and shift it into place, but my eyelashes are so long that you don't see the creasing anyway. So I like to, rather than make it cakey and make the lines more obvious, instead I don't like to set my concealer. However, if you're somebody that has a lot of colour correcting to do underneath the eyes because you suffer with pigmentation or super dark circles, then you probably will need to set it in place. You can also take a little bit of either a contour or bronzer underneath your jaw. I don't tend to do it because my jaw's quite defined anyway. Just make sure you blend it down into your neck if you do. Just set around my hairline with the bronzer. You can then take a little bit of highlighter if you want to. I'm not a big fan of highlighter, so I'm just going to go back in with Lisa Eldridge's Elevated Glow in Crystal Nebula, and I'm going to use the back of my sponge to apply it. So just dab in a little bit of the product and pop that on the high points of the cheeks. This is a really nice subtle way to add glow, and I think it's more of a grown-up highlighter. Nothing too frosted, it just bounces the light back. Now at my home reception I used my Cosmetics a la carte lipstick, which I had made bespoke for the wedding, but on the day I was in such a faff I couldn't find it. It was actually buried in one of my bags, so I used it for the home reception, but on the day I grabbed, which I actually really liked in the end, Peach Bud lipstick by Anastasia Beverly Hills. Before I started, which I didn't do today, I went in with the Nude Sticks Hydropeptide lip butter and let that soak in. I'll pop a little bit on. That way they weren't dry before I applied any lipstick. So I'm going to go in with the Diego de la Palma number 48 lip liner. I'm not big on lip liner. I don't like how it kind of like accentuates my lips. I know that's the point, but I don't like it on me. I don't think I topped my lips up once on the day. Once it wore off, I just kind of went au naturel. See how kind of like that just defines my lips, but it's very natural still, so that's a really lovely one. And then, as I said, I went in with the Peach Bud lipstick on the official wedding, and then I would show you my bespoke lipstick, but I've left it in my friend Rihanna's bag because she had my lipstick to give it to me to top up throughout the night, which again I didn't bother to do. But I really like this one. This was my just in case lipstick. I took loads of just in case I couldn't find something, which happened to be a bonus because I couldn't find my lipstick. And that's really beautiful. And then to set that in place, I used the LH Cosmetics On-Set Long Lasting Setting Spray. This one is phenomenal. Linda, the brand owner, she did a little video of her using this. She puts on some coloured eyeshadows onto her face, sprays it, and then rubs it, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So if you want something that's really long lasting, this is really good. It's cruelty free, vegan, so yeah. And there is a specific mattifying one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do my hair. I will film it just to show you how I do it, a quick version of my wedding hair. I will put obviously on screen the photo that I took of my makeup next to the window for natural daylight. This is the makeup. And that completes today's makeup tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you thought in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Don't forget to follow me outside of YouTube over on Instagram for more, and I will see you next week. Bye guys.